We're gathered for the first time that this Scrutiny Committee has received a call-in since 2021. So we've been fairly careful about making sure we know what we're doing, and I hope we do. Welcome to this special meeting of the Corporate Performance and Budget Scrutiny Committee to consider a call-in of an executive member decision. I'm Councillor Pete Pillinger, Chair of the committee, and we'll do the introductions in a moment. We have committee members in the Civic Centre along with officer support. The meeting is being live streamed via YouTube and will be available on the Council's website. Some housekeeping for those of you in the Civic Centre. There are no fire drills planned, so if the fire alarm goes off, I'd like you to leave by the emergency exits, which are marked, and congregate in the rear car park. Would you please do what I'm about to do, which is turn your mobile phones onto silent or vibrate or whatever you use, but so that they're not going to give us that wonderful signal that you get in the adverts in the cinemas, so that we're not disturbed by your phones. And when you are not speaking, will you ensure that the microphone in front of you is not showing red, and that is it's turned off. For those joining us via Microsoft Teams, please remain muted and indicate at your appropriate time when you would like to speak, and I will bring you in. We have 3 members of council on the Teams link at the moment. We'll move on to the agenda. Are there any apologies for absence? I've had an apology of absence from Councillor Bollenberg and substituted by Councillor Peter Gabbert, and for Councillor what's his name? Will King, sorry, substituted by Karen Walton. Grateful for your attendance for Peter Gabbert and Councillor Walton. Very glad you were able to make it. We have one declaration of interest that I know of. Councillor Green.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, the call-in request came in the day before Council, and there was a notice of motions submitted to that Council meeting as well, which referenced car parking issues in general, proposed by Councillor Burrows. I seconded that motion. So for the basis of transparency, I declare that as a personal interest, but I of course retain an open mind throughout this, and will do this evening as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other declarations of interest? Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Chair. I also was part of the call-in request, but unfortunately Councillor King cannot attend tonight, so I've been called in to be substitute. Again, it's a personal interest, and I will keep an open mind about any of the subjects we discussed tonight.
Thank you. As these call-in meetings are relatively rare, I'm going to outline in a little bit of detail what the purpose of this meeting is, and the constraints upon it, what the purpose is for us. This call-in meeting is about whether the principles of decision-making and due process were followed in accordance with the Council's constitution. It is not about the decision of the ultimate decision that was made. It's about the process of making that decision. That may seem a little of a bit of hair splitting, but actually it's vitally important. The decisions of the council made through its executive. We are not a policy making body. We are a scrutiny and overview body, and we therefore do not make policy for the council. That is the right place for policy decisions is in the cabinet and in the full council. I will invite Councillor David Howarth as the lead member requesting the call-in to provide any context and background to the call-in. I will then invite the other 4 members on the call-in, Councillors Karen Walton, Angela Turner, Joan Burrows and David Shaw, to add anything further, but it is expected that Councillor Howarth will make the key points. I will then invite the decision maker, Councillor Wesley Roberts, Cabinet Member for Finance and Assets, supported by Gail Wootton, Director of Property and Planning, to respond to the information provided as part of the call-in. Members of the committee will then spend some time asking questions of the Cabinet Member, followed by members of the Council who are not members of the committee. After that, any members of the public with questions you'll be free to ask your questions. When we get to that stage, there are two desks, one on the left over here, one on the right, which have a microphone, and if you wish to speak, you will be asked to move to the desk so that you can be heard. The meeting will, at that point, after those questions, adjourn for the committee to consider its decisions, and the meeting will then reconvene to make a decision and vote. I would therefore like to ask Councillor Howarth and the other members named on the call-in to provide further context and background to the call-in. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chairman. We've set out a number of issues over the process of how all of this has taken place, which I think we're all particularly disappointed about. Those are the lack of any engagement or consultation with elected members, either by officers or cabinet members. And when I say elected members, I appreciate that some may have had some input, but certainly those of us who called this in don't feel that we have. Inadequate publicity for the consultation process, the lack of any published timescales for the process to take place, and it was interesting that we only had a decision and a timescale after a motion had been put to the last full council. The lack of any rationale on why decisions have been taken, and there are some contradictions in the final decision, and the failure to adopt any process with which to gain local knowledge before arriving at a final decision which adversely impacts on local communities. We are the elected members, we represent our wards. My ward in particular of Howickham Priory has the Liverpool Road car park in it, and yet my local knowledge of having lived there 35 years and represented the area at one level or another in local government for over 30 years doesn't seem to be anything that is worth considering or tapping into. So I will move on to the papers that we've been presented with in the report. The first reference directed us to the Cabinet meeting which took place on the 17th of September, and there are aspects of that report which I don't disagree with. Creating tariffs will allow a greater churn of traffic. Some of the problems we have is that certainly in the car park in my ward, you can't actually get into it after 9 o'clock in the morning because it's just rammed all day. And being in a vibrant local business community, it's supposed to be a shopper's car park, and we would like more access to it. But the Cabinet report back in September also went on to say that there are other considerations to take into account depending upon the purpose of the visit, such as shopping, meeting for a coffee, eating lunch, going there for an appointment, and people value the availability of spaces, and the use of tariffs and enforcement would ensure a churn of vehicles throughout the day. Some of the problems we have with the decisions that have been taken, and as I say, we've somewhat been shut out from the process, is that, again, I'm going to keep referring to Liverpool Road because that's in my ward, and other members may well wish to refer to car parks in their wards, but this is a cafe culture. It's the most successful business street or business road, perhaps in South Ribble, if not the county. We don't have closed business units. We don't have shops that are boarded up. When a unit becomes available, it's quickly snapped up because it is a vibrant area. But if you want a cafe culture, you can't restrict people to an hour. And and then expect them to rush back and not return within 3 hours. I've read all of the responses to the consultation, a consultation, the replies to which nobody had seen apart from the cabinet member, unless he's shared it with other people, until we called this in today because it wasn't published anywhere. There's no access to it. And having read all of those responses, there are themes that come through there which don't seem to have been taken on board. And then some of the reasons we've been given for the 1 hour in some car parks, 2 hours in other car parks, 3 hours in other car parks. Certainly the reason I've been given is the cost. Apparently it's going to cost in the region of £30,000 to resurface that car park, although there's a question mark over where has that figure come from. Where is the necessity to carry it out? But that has been given as a reason as to why you can only have 1 hour, because it has to pay for itself. That isn't meeting the corporate objectives of, sorry, bear with me, our objective this year in the corporate plan is building a cooperative and thriving local economy by making the most of existing council assets. You're not going to build a thriving economy if people are restricted from the amount of time they can actually spend in the local shops, cafes, yoga centres, dance classes, so on and so forth. And then moving on to some of the responses, it said corporate priorities. It's an exemplary council, but it's also what I've just read out from the corporate plan. And then we've got the background to the report, which answers some of the points, or sets out to answer some of the points we've been raised. It gives a table of the original position and the proposed changes following on from the consultation after careful consideration of the responses received and discussions with elected members. Well, I don't know which elected members you've had discussions with, but as I say, as a member for Howick and Priory, along with Councillor Shaw, Councillor Lillis, you certainly haven't carried out any discussions with us. Likewise, with the members for Broadoak, you haven't carried out any discussions with Councillor Turner or with Councillor Burton Johnson, and I suspect you haven't carried out any discussions with Councillor Burrows in Kingsfold either, but she may well be able to clarify that. So there's a bit of a confusion because the original proposals were just to compare the two car parks in Penwitham, where it will be 1 hour free at Liverpool Road and 1 hour free at Ryfield Avenue. But now you've apparently considered all the consultation responses, but 1 hour free remains at Liverpool Road and it's now 2 hours free at Ryfield Avenue. Well, I would contend there are far more businesses and far more places to visit in Liverpool Road than there are in Ryfield Avenue, but Ryfield Avenue gets the 2 hours free, whereas we are left with the 1 hour, although I do commend you for having removed the weekly passes where you could pay £12 for all-day parking for 7 days, because that would simply not solve the major problem we've got if that had been left in place. So going on to the responses to the concerns we've raised, the lack of engagement or consultation with elected members. We're told that all members receive notifications of what is going to Cabinet and invited to attend. Well, I'm sure we do read the Cabinet papers, but if we're seriously suggesting that all 50 members attend the Cabinet so we can actually know what's going on, why bother having a council? We might as well just dispense with the council. Let's all go to the Cabinet meeting. The Cabinet member also engaged with members on the proposals and had several one-to-one discussions on specific car parks. Again, no idea who those discussions were held with, but that certainly wasn't on offer to myself, and I suspect it wasn't on offer to others. And discussions were also held with the whole Cabinet on numerous occasions. Well, that's not the members or local elected members representing those areas. Officers implementing these proposals were available and open to conversations with members. Members could have contacted officers for a specific discussion if they felt that would be beneficial. I attempted that. I actually phoned the officers because having contacted Democratic Services on a number of occasions saying, where is this coming forward for discussion? And it clearly wasn't. I attempted to contact the officers to put forward the views of my fellow councillors in Higher Penwitham. Officer wasn't available. I explained to the person who answered the phone why I was calling, what I was calling about, and I'm still waiting for a reply. But members of the Cabinet were fully informed at a number of leader briefing meetings. I'm not sure that anybody outside of the Cabinet is actually allowed to attend those, so that wouldn't be much use to us. And then in terms of how the consultation was taken place, well, it was advertised on Citizen Space. I'm not sure many residents would know what that is. Notices were placed on every car park with all the information, which is great. Unless you go into a car park that's rammed from 9 o'clock in the morning, you can't park your car, so you can't get out to actually read the notice that's on the lamppost in the first place. And notices were placed at the Civic Centre reception. Well, it might come as a surprise, but the vast majority of residents don't live in this corner of the borough and don't attend the Civic Centre on a regular basis, if ever at all. A notice was placed in the Lancashire Evening Post and a press release was issued on the 19th of November. Well, not to members, it wasn't. And why, as elected members, are we having to find out decisions of the council in a press release? May well have been posted on social channels, but I've no idea where. It certainly wasn't posted on Community Hub social channels, because we had members coming to our community conversation expressing their concerns and the views that 1 hour parking in our car park wasn't enough. But again, no consultation that I'm aware of with the community hubs. And then we find out we've received 179 responses across the 9 car parks. As I've already said, if we hadn't called this in, we would be none the wiser about that, because nowhere else apart from in this report have those responses been published, unless somebody can tell me otherwise. And then, of course, there is an option to subscribe to updates on the decision. With all due respect, Mr. Chairman, I'm an elected member of this council. I shouldn't be having to subscribe to receive updates on decisions of council. They should be freely and openly available. Again, there was a press release issued on the 19th of March announcing the decision. I'd actually written to the Cabinet member prior to that. I'd written to the Cabinet member on the 10th of March, setting out yet again what I tried to explain to the officers and setting out the concerns of the residents, which are all echoed in the responses we've finally been able to read. And I got a reply on the Saturday, the 21st of March, after the press release had gone out and after the decision had been announced. In terms of lack of available information on the consultation responses received, the responses were provided to the Cabinet on the 19th of December. But again, unless we can actually see what these responses are, it's very difficult for us to act and take a view on them. And the lack of rationale on why decisions have been taken. Again, we're told these factors led to a discussion on each car park to consider an appropriate strategy. Discussion with who? I certainly don't recall any discussion with the council or members of the council generally. And we're being told consistency across the borough was also a factor. Well, it isn't. From the outset, we were told there wasn't a one-size-fits-all. And now you've got 3 hour car parking at one leisure centre, 2 hour car parking at another leisure centre, 1 hour free parking on Liverpool Road in Penwitham, 2 hours free parking at Ryfield Road in Penwitham. The consistency just isn't there. So, Mr. Chairman, I think we are disappointed in the way this whole process has been handled, and I will leave that there. And if anybody else wishes to add to it, then
thank you, Councillor Howard. Do either of the other members of the council who are at your side wish to speak?
Yes.
Could you indicate? Could you press the button, please, Jo?
So I just want to work through the agenda as well, if you don't mind. So I'll be as quick as I can. So item 7 relates to the fact that this is an exemplary council. So an exemplary council should have transparency, and I think that's in partial breach of that, because the petition feedback appears to be being ignored. Another heading under that is community engagement, and again the council will be in breach if they ignore residents' views, if they're disregarded. And then accountability. There could be a potential breach if a councillor trying to represent the residents is undermined. And that's how I felt in the instances when I've stood up in council. So if I look, item 11, I mean, I was the author of that notice of motion. So obviously this is very dear to my heart. So if we look at the decision, in some paperwork, so I'm not an expert, but in some paperwork I have read that a decision was made at the Executive Cabinet on the 17th of September 2025, subject to the public consultation. So that consultation ran for 3 weeks in the run-up to Christmas. Who was going to be looking to fill a consultation in 3 weeks, in the 3 weeks run-up to Christmas? So I have to ask the question, were minds made up at that point? And if so, how can South Ribble Borough Council claim to be this exemplary council when it's got a commitment to high standards, when it appears that a decision has been made before the public consultation had run its course? So that's that. So then if I go to call-in reason number 1. So it says here that the Cabinet member engaged with members on the proposals and had several one-to-one discussions. Actually, the Cabinet member, I think he's quite a nice man. He's always got a smile on his face, so this is nothing personal. But maybe his conversations with me had been prior to a full council meeting when we were getting sandwiches, and it was me that had approached him, asking him what is he going to do about the proposal to introduce car parking charges in Myfield Avenue, and told him about the effect that was going to have on shoppers and on businesses. And yes, prior to the notice of motion, the Cabinet member did try to ring me. In fact, I missed 2 of his calls, but I returned both of them. One to have a message to say that he was busy, and the other one that he wasn't feeling well. So that has been my engagement with the Cabinet member. So moving on to call-in reason 2. So being an exemplary council, of which we say we are, involves active engagement with residents. So how can South Ribble Borough Council claim to have had active engagement? So Councillor Howard has alluded to this, but to claim Facebook likes, you know, how does that compare to a petition?
Can I just hold on a moment and say, if things have been already raised by Councillor Howarth, they don't need raising again.
Okay, so then I'll talk about the petition. So against those things, I mean, how do they compare as community engagement with a petition? A petition that was signed by, prior to the deadline, 1,209 people. And of course, by the time of the evening, the council meeting, when there was the notice of motion, that totalled 2,677. And that was just me asking residents as they were coming to the shops. You know, not over a substantial 3-week period, just a couple of hours here and there. So, and a petition as well. I was looking, because again, you know, I'm not an expert in these things, but councils
are required to consider petitions, particularly a significant one that's numbering 2,677. And those petitions, I'm told, usually trigger some formal acknowledgement, of which I've not had, or debate, which hasn't happened. And that's under the Localism Act of 2011. In fact, it goes on to say that ignoring a large petition undermines community trust, and that conflicts of the principles of an exemplary council, of which South Ribble wants to be or is. Also as well, undermining a councillor who presents the residents' concerns is equally questionable, and it may be a breach of the local government code of conduct. So there's that. Call in 3. Can I just go on to say that I first raised the issue about the car parking or the proposed charges in Ryfield Avenue car park, because that's the ward that I'm elected to serve. And these things that we're raising will be comparable across all car parks if you spoke to residents. I first raised that at a council meeting on the 17th of November. And because I hadn't had the appropriate responses, I brought it back to the full council on the 4th of March, but I wasn't allowed to ask that question under the terms of the Constitution. So I accept that. But that's what triggered me to bring the notice of motion, because I felt it was so important. If we go on to the call-in reason 5, under that heading, I mean, has the council thought of the impact that's going to have on local residents and on local businesses in the area? In the area that Ryfield Avenue car park serves, the small businesses there's actually one that has a closing down sale on at the moment. They're closing. There are 3 others that are considering closing, and there is one that is considering moving their business to another business unit. That is the impact that car parking charges and increased rents are having on those local businesses. Picking up on the businesses, they all have staff. Some of those staff are on minimum wage. It's going to cost them £642 a year to actually pay for car parking. So in effect, all those staff are taking a £642 a year pay cut.
Councillor, can I just go back to what I said right at the beginning of this meeting? We are here to question and examine the process by which the decision was made. The decision itself is not a matter for this committee, except in as far as the process might or might not have been adequate. So questions that relate to the decision itself are not the remit of this committee.
Okay. Okay, I thank you for that. So I'll close on that note.
I want to just open up to the members of the committee.
Chairman, I do want to raise a point of order, if you don't mind. We've been having a look at the Constitution, the Council's Constitution, and page 206, which talks about scrutiny meetings, says, if any member of the committee has a conflict of interest, in particular, no member may be involved in scrutinising a decision in which they have a personal interest. Now, 2 members of your committee declared a personal interest at the beginning of this meeting, and according to the Council's Constitution, therefore they shouldn't take any further part in the meeting.
I take note of what you've said. I've also listened to what that personal interest is and the background. I've asked one of those people what the background to their involvement. Councillor Green was asked to sign something that he had not been involved in the formulating of. So I took the view that that actually was not something that I took the view that he was able to have an open mind on the matter, which I think is what's required. I haven't had time to ask the same of Councillor Walton. I will just take a moment to get some advice. My advice is that what we're looking for is prejudicial interests, and
As always, I will bow to the chairman's decision, but
Thank you.
that's clearly not what the Constitution says.
one moment then. It's all your call, Chair. Yeah. I note that the people concerned with the personal interests were not people who were formulating the motion. They were not the person at the head of the list. You're saying...
Sorry, but one of them, I accept with Councillor Green, there's an argument to say his interest is slightly removed.
Yeah.
But the other committee member who declared an interest signed the call-in that brought us here tonight. Now, again, I will always bow to the chairman's decision. You're in charge of this meeting, but I'm just really keen that the meeting is seen to be run in a fair and consistent manner along the lines laid down within the council's constitution.
Thank you. It's possible under the Constitution for myself to have called the matter in and still have the responsibility of chairing the meeting. I think, Councillor Tomlinson, if you will allow me as chair to assure you that this committee will do its job properly, and that if in our decision making I detect any matters sorry, I'm getting problems with not hearing because of the infrared. This doesn't always pick up my voice and it's disturbing me. I'm going to leave the two members of the committee on the committee for the current discussion and questioning. The questioning that we will be making of the office of the cabinet member has already been discussed with the members of the committee and is not coming out of individual members but from the committee. So that questioning, I think, remains. When we get to the decision making, which we will do after the questioning of the decision, those people will be in the room, but we will ask them to be mindful of the fact that they have been involved and have declared their personal interests.
Thanks, Chairman. If I could just add to that, I thank Councillor Tomlinson for raising this point, because at the end of the day, we take our responsibilities as scrutiny members incredibly seriously, because we want to be seen to be doing the right things and be seen by the public to be doing the right things. But just to add to what you've already said, I mean, under the Constitution, if the chairman was absent for any reason, I could call in any decision as an individual, as the vice chairman of this committee, and still sit on this committee to consider that. And to give another example, we've had few and far between we've had call-in requests at Southfield. I think 5 meetings in 25 years. But at the last meeting of scrutiny that considered a call-in request, a member that signed the call-in request sat on that committee. And that was allowed at the time. So if that offers some reassurance, and just to repeat what I said personally and what I think Councillor Walton said as well, it's important that we at all times retain an open mind, which is exactly what we will be doing. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Green. Councillor Howarth, you had your hand up a moment.
It was just an observation, Mr. Chairman, but Councillor Tomlinson isn't a member of this committee, so I'm just wondering on what basis he's raising a point of order. He might be able to ask a question as a member of the audience, but I'm not sure you can raise a point of order if you're not actually a member of the committee to start with.
I will be, as chair of this committee, and to ensure the openness of the scrutiny committee, always ready to hear points of order about the process by which we operate the committee from members of the council. So I allowed it on that basis. I want to ask members of the committee if you have any matters of clarification that you wish to make of those who have... Sorry, Councillor Green.
Yes, if I may, please, Chairman. 2 points. Can I, first of all, thank Councillor Alworth and Councillor Burrows for bringing this forward, and for the other people that signed this and for attending this evening to allow us to consider it. Can I ask 2 questions, if I may? One to Councillor Alworth and one to Councillor Burrows. So to Councillor Alworth, I've listened to the concerns which you have raised and made a note of the relevant points, which I'm sure we'll be teasing out in questions later. Can I ask you what would you like the outcome to be from this evening's meeting? So that's the question to yourself. And the question to Councillor Burrows is, you've talked about the signatures that you collected both during the consultation period and subsequently. And I think you said you had 1,209 signatures during the consultation period. Just can I check, because I've seen other other petitions elsewhere that have been manipulated in some way by getting signatures from people that have not directly affected. Can I just ask for confirmation from you that there is a trace on where those signatures have come from, and are they all local businesses or local residents that use those businesses, etc., or are there any that are far beyond the local area?
And before you answer that, to save you having to answer questions about the petition from a number of us at once, I want to ask if other members of the committee have questions about the petition in particular. In which case, I would like you to describe to me the process by which the petition was put together, who put the wording of the petition together, where was the petition placed to get the signatures? For example, were you standing out in the car park with a clipboard, or were they put on shop fronts, or if you follow me? So I just want to get an idea of where those signatories came from, and how the petition was put together. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes. The petition was initially put together. It was one of the shops, I can't remember now, it could have been the Butty Bar, that actually put some wording together, and I actually amended it for them. And then the petition was put in every business in the Kingsfold trading area. So every business in the Kingsfold trading area had the petition on their counters. So their customers and other shop users were actually coming in and either seeing it and voluntarily just signing up after reading it, or the staff were mentioning it to them, so that then they could either sign the petition or decline. That was their choice. That was how the petition was done. And then I went round and collected it all, and brought it here to the council and handed it in.
And then, Councillor Green, does that answer your questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Sorry. Are there any other matters of clarification that committee members wish to raise? Thank you very much. Councillor Howard, there was a question from Councillor Green that you didn't.
See,
I didn't give you the opportunity to answer.
My concerns are still here. I'm being sidelined and not being listened to. In answer to Councillor Green's question, up until this report was published, we had no sight of the consultation responses. The arguments that I tried to put forward have been certainly supported by those consultation responses. So what I would, as an outcome, what I would like the committee to perhaps consider making as a recommendation is that there is a reconsideration in view of those responses of achieving more consistency, because, as I say, there have been responses about leisure centres where you can have 3 hours free parking at one but only 2 at another. You only get 1 hour's free parking on Liverpool Road, but you get 2 hours free parking at Ryfield Road. There doesn't seem to be a consistency, so what I would be hoping for is a reconsideration at least. It may well be that the Cabinet member decides, no, I've got it right, but I would just like a revisit of those responses and the decision that's been taken.
Yeah, the Cabinet member may be able to give some indication on why the variance that you've mentioned has occurred in the process. So we will wait till we've heard that decision and then we will go and discuss our recommendations. But thank you for that comment. So I thank you, the three of you who've come to speak to us in proposing the call-in and with the notice of motion that the Council has decided is coming into the same remit. We're very grateful for you putting the time in. It is vital in a democracy that we have processes like this. And while I wouldn't want to sort of ask for more of them, it is right that when councillors feel concerned that they can bring this process to this committee, and I'm grateful to you for doing so. I'm going to ask you to swap seating positions so that the Cabinet member can come and sit down along with his supporting officer. Before we move on to that item of agenda, Councillor Shaw had a question or is indicating a wish to speak, and I haven't noticed it on the screen. So, Councillor Shaw, would you be able to raise your point now?
Hopefully you'll be able to hear me through this microphone. Thank you. I wondered if the committee could, as part of the deliberations, give some sort of guidance. The Cabinet member has clearly given some indication that informal channels of communication, and I'm a great believer in not doing things through the formal method if we can get things done on the quiet. But for some of these things, like something that's gone to a public consultation with expenditures associated with it, can the Scrutiny Committee perhaps give some guidance as a result of this as to what extent those communications with either officers or with Cabinet members need to be documented? Thank you.
Thank you for the question. We will take note of the question in our deliberations.
Thank you.
I am grateful to Councillor Wesley Roberts for his attending the committee, and we now turn to his contribution. He is supported by Gail Wootton, and I ask them between them, whoever is making such contributions, to give an introduction to their contribution.
Thanks, Chair. Do you want me to do my bit now, or do you want us to introduce ourselves?
That's
going to mine.
You might introduce yourselves.
So I'm Wes Roberts. I'm Cabinet member for Finance and Assets. So remember that. Well done. Council for Buxton and Worden, live in Leyland, Mitchell, and then on my left.
So I'm Gail Wootton. I'm the Director of Property and Planning.
I'm Alan Court. I'm Head of Operational Assets.
And since you have reminded me, in my introduction, I said that we would do the introduction, we would introduce the members of the committee later, and I haven't done so. So I'm going to ask if Councillor Johnson would introduce herself, and then we will, the committee members will introduce ourselves.
Hi, I'm Claire Burton-Johnson, Councillor for Broadoak in Pemberton.
I'm Councillor Deborah Ashton, and I'm Councillor for Charnock Ward in Pemberton.
I'm Councillor Jane Bell, and I'm the Councillor for Seven Stars Ward in Mayland.
Good evening, everyone. Michael Green. I'm the councillor for Moss Side Ward and Vice Chairman of the Scrutiny Committee.
And you will know that I'm the chair. I'm Councillor Peter Pillinger. I am also councillor for Buckshot and Worden Ward.
Good evening, I'm Councillor Karen Walton and I represent Farrington West.
Hello, I'm Peter Gabbett, Councillor for Lostercall Ward.
Thank you. And our officers are?
Ben Story, Democratic and Member Services Officer.
Darren Cranshaw, Head of Democratic Services.
So I think we've now done what we should have done at the beginning of the meeting. My apologies to the members of the committee that I didn't ask you to introduce yourselves earlier. But it's perhaps a good opportunity to ask now that Councillor Roberts, if you would like to make your contribution.
Yeah, no, thanks, Chair. Always happy to be here. Always take the spirit that Scrutiny's offered in and the usefulness of the committee. Nice to see Councillor Bell as well, and also members of the public as well. We don't often get members of the public, so it's always nice to see people engage and come forward in the spirit of sharing their views. My day started at 6:30. We've naps on the settee, followed by soft play at 11:30, and finishes, well, just begins maybe at Scrutiny at 6:30 or 6 o'clock. And I kind of reflected today on kind of being involved in public service and kind of putting yourself forward and in response to kind of this calling. And one of the things I learned quite early on, or not, I wish I'd learned a bit earlier, was that you can't be a perfectionist because there's no such thing as being perfect, but my parents instilled in me of just trying your best, and that's what we've tried to do in this process. In my role as Cabinet Member for Finance Assets, I'll be the biggest advocate and the biggest challenger of this council. Where it does well, I'll praise it and celebrate it, and I'll fight its battles, but also where it kind of needs to improve and reflect and work more in favour of kind of communities rather than the corporate perspective. I'll fight that challenge and kind of be thought-provoking in that sense. And we have a really, we're held to a really high standard by the public because we're a council, and rightly so. And sometimes it feels a little bit unjust, and sometimes there's a feeling that, politicians must solve everything, and politicians don't necessarily help themselves by saying they can solve everything, but then they actually can't. But in this process, what we've tried to do is look at kind of not just the issue of car parking in isolation, but just in the context of the financial situation of the council, where we're facing a 1.8 million gap in our finances next year. It's 10% of our annual revenue budget. And that's quite a chunk of money, and we should be upfront about that. And that's why we're trying to, the idea was behind this was about making the service of car parks, which is not a statutory service, sustainable, and it ran off its own feet. So I think 2 years ago it cost us £35,000. Last year it cost us £55,000. This year it would probably cost us more if we didn't take some steps. And it's about, car parks are deteriorating in their quality, and that's what the proposal was about. And the consultation was about looking if there was a different operating model. So did people want us to keep the car parks in-house and look after them and invest in them? Did they want us to sell them off and give them to a private company? Did people want to buy them off us, etc., etc.? We, as a council, we've always got to think about where we put our resources, and we're a district council that punches above its weight, and we've got to be proportionate, and we've got to have a real focus on who really needs our support, and that's why we have to make choices around where do we put money. And if we're focusing it on deprivation and people need help, can we also be kind of spending money on car parks that maybe not necessarily all our residents use, etc. But we also value the process, the value of car parks in our local communities and supporting our local businesses and high streets, and it's getting that fine balance. And for me, this process was all about taking the time to focus on how we do things, not just what we're doing. So doing things in the right way, not just making a decision, where there's a lot of consultations where you actually just go out to consult, it comes back with responses, and the next week someone makes a decision, and it was the same as what was in the consultation that went out, and this wasn't the case in this scenario. In terms of kind of my personal, I think the team have done a great job, and I've really been supported very well, and we've outlined in the paper all the different reasons why we feel that the mitigate against the calling in terms of the 6 points I think that are there. I just wanted to and I think they speak volumes for themselves in terms of how we have gone above and beyond in some places. Alan went in to see local shops, and actually we interrogated further information on the various things, because including rent reviews, because there was lots of stuff and different angles to look at. But I just wanted to take a little bit of time to talk about kind of my personal kind of attempt to try and against all them 6 points in terms of my role. I've said earlier, being a councillor is tough, because you can always do more, can't you? And we should always want to do more. And when we've got kind of such low voting rates, we want people to engage, and we've got to try our best to be innovative. But in terms of my kind of role in this, I've attended Scrutiny a few times since the Cabinet meeting. I don't recall a question being asked specifically on this consultation or the process of it. I've been available for either side of meetings in terms of full council meetings, etc. And members have approached me before and after meetings. My phone number's on the website. I had a chap called, I won't say his name, but I had a chap calling me about Liverpool Road. Didn't know who he was. We had a great conversation, and he brought an issue, and we looked at it, and that's what we do. We're responsive, and we're pragmatic, and we look at how we can compromise on things, because ultimately it's the decision we might get to isn't necessarily what everyone agrees on, but how we get to it's quite important. I've spoken to various members on all sides. I will speak a little bit. Sorry, I say on more sides. I'll say I will say a little bit of on the comments made earlier by the people that have called it in, but I'll finish this bit first, if that's okay, Chair. We have had different people and councillors who have come to us have asked for a meeting with officers, which has been offered. We've gathered more information and responded to information when there's a particular issue being raised, specifically around Ryfield, because there's quite a commercial interest there for the council in that area as well. And we have engaged personally with comments on Facebook posts and social media posts, and I've considered them comments alongside the consultation responses as well, even though they weren't formal responses, especially when they've raised issues that we could potentially try and mitigate against. In terms of the kind of outcome, in terms of, I think saying the process, there was no timescales on it. There was big Facebook posts that had talking about the different timelines in terms of the implementation of the process, because there's lots of different bits of the process. So this is about the decision, and that video has been seen by, well, it's been viewed 16,000 times. So I can't say 16,000 people. Some people might watch it twice. I might have been one of them. No, only joking. I went through all the consultation responses over the Christmas period. I read the raw data. And they really did inform my decision-making process, because I pulled out specific ones that were thought-provoking and actually spoke to the officers about them, and that's why the consultation that went out compared to the decision that approved the various different changes, that's why they changed so much, because we actually listened to people, because that's what we should do. I also specifically looked at the rationale for each car park, because each car park does have a different purpose, and I think it was really clear. It was really important that we were clear about what that purpose was for each car park. Now I can appreciate that's not necessarily been published in the decision making process, but it's not something we would usually do. Obviously we have a role to communicate kind of what the outcome is and be clear, and I did consider, should I do something specific for each car park in a Facebook post or a video, and it was kind of thought that might be a bit confusing for residents as well. But there's been sorry, I'll just finish these 2 points and then we'll go back to the other bits. So there's been several discussions kind of internally as well about all the kind of local information we've got on these car parks, and whilst everyone might not be happy with the decision outcome, I do think the process, whilst it wasn't perfect, I do think it was pretty darn good, and we did go above and beyond in different ways, and it was also proportionate to the resources we have as council, but also and also the impact on our communities. If I may, before I move on to kind of some reflections in terms of kind of continuous improvement and areas scrutiny might want to think about, because I've reflected on the process because it wasn't perfect, but it was not too bad either. I just wanted to come to a few points that were raised by the people who called it in the spirit of kind of they were presented. So there was quite a lot of comments, so I'll just respond to them in turn and try not to take up too much time, Chair. There was a suggestion that the full council motion triggered a decision on it. I can see why the timing on that appears a bit like that, but we were ready to make a decision the week before, but one of the officers, well, I think it was Alan, was on annual leave, so we couldn't, we can't, people's lives carry on, and sometimes decisions go to the next week, so that's why that was. There was something about being shut out from the process. No one was specifically shut out from the process. Anyone who's engaged with me, I've tried to engage back. I will say that, I always try my best, but we've all got personal lives and personal things that happen. I think I've responded to a couple of members in here kind of say, family's not too well at the minute, we'll get back to you when I can, and then kind of followed up in person when I've seen them. There was a comment about no access to consultation responses, and yeah, fair enough. Maybe they weren't published, but no one asked either. And there's kind of an element of, as councillors, it's tough, isn't it? It's tough because you've got your day job, you've got your family, you're doing this as well, and it isn't easy when you're getting weekly planning emails and weekly updates and this and that, and you're trying to just filter lots of information, and actually sometimes it's not a case of withholding things, it's just a case of we're all busy as well, and it's kind of, we don't think to necessarily share X, Y and Z. If someone came to me and said, can I see the consultation response on this? Absolutely, knock yourself out. That's what I did over Christmas, like brilliant, and there was a lot of repetition, it was a lot of narrowing down, and then there was also some actual good nuggets in there to go, okay, that's really helpful. I have checked my response to Councillor Howarth, and my email could have been a bit clearer to him. I did offer to have a chat with him as well, but my email could have been a bit clearer. What I was trying to say was that basically we can't have I think there was a big strong sense in the consultation on Steve Brown to having 2 hours free, and the financial model wouldn't really stack up having 2 hours free because of the amount of free tickets you give out. So therefore, that's where we drew the line. Some of them we're introducing an actual parking machine, which cost about £7,000, but in return, we are investing into the car parks. So Liverpool Road is getting an investment, and the figure of 30,000 was brought up by our team, and that's what, we follow the professional advice. In return, Ryfield is getting 2 hours free, but there's no ticket machine there. But there is an option for long stay permits, which will generate some income as well. And it's kind of getting that balance of occupancy rate, turnover, who's using things, different type of clientele and market and user, in terms of you're probably going to go to Liverpool Road for a lot longer than you would to Ryfield. That's just, that's my experience of the local area. Unless you worked there, then you'd want longer. That was my next point about the difference of Ryfield and Liverpool Road. So there is a difference. I was really keen to try and get a bit of consistency, at least across Penwith, but unfortunately just wasn't capable, especially with the triangulation of kind of the commercial interests of the council as well in Ryfield, which, our properties, property investments generate about 1.6 million for all council taxpayers. So we've got to kind of bear that in mind, that we're not just acting in interest of one thing, it's various spinning plates. I think if officers aren't responding, whether they are or not, I'm not going to argue that, but come to me and speak to me. I did kind of, I think with Councillor Howe's email in particular, it's not personal or anything, there's not a but either. It's kind of, I got the email, I read it, didn't respond initially, there was nothing that I hadn't already considered in it that I needed extra information on, so I didn't think it warranted necessarily further discussion, but I was more than happy to receive one if you needed one, and I did offer to explain my rationale and my kind of rationale that's behind the decision making process over email when I replied on that Saturday, and I'm happy to have that conversation because there is differences. There was reference around leisure centre disparity. Now initially the consultation did go out with a disparity in it. And the difference was that Bamber Bridge would have longer than Leyland, but the rationale behind that was that there's more at Bamber Bridge. So there's the play football, there's a park, there's the leisure centre, where at Leyland there's just a leisure centre. But there was a strong, if you've all read which I'm sure you have, as diligent members of the Scrutiny Committee, knowing the chair, if you've all read the consultation responses, there's a big strength of feeling around Leyland Barracudas and things like that, and the practical things. And the idea behind restricting times at the leisure centres is not about restricting access to members. What it's about is prioritising access to the car park for members. So if even now with the restriction, there is going to be a workaround that if someone needs to access the leisure centre for more than 3 hours to use the gym, there will be a workaround that the people there can do that. Have I got it right? Who knows? I've done what I think's right, and that's really important. Councillor Shaw mentioned, he kind of used the phrase "on the quiet," and I got the gist of what he was saying. I don't think we tried to do anything on the quiet. I think it's just been whoever's approached me, I've spoke to, and if I've needed information, I've spoke to them. I've spoke to other Pembrokeshire councillors about Liverpool, not necessarily not necessarily the ward councillors, and I've got my own views as well and opinions on Liverpool Road, because I know the different car parks. And Cabinet did delegate this decision to me, so there was a formal trail of events and process, and in terms of transparency and all the principles, so that's important. If I could quickly respond to Councillor Burrow's comments, and then I could move on to my reflections, if that's okay. Thank you, Chair. In terms of the petition, it did impact the decision making. I think there was a full council meeting where I stood up and said I thought it was quite powerful, the response, even if I didn't necessarily agree with the framing of the petition. But whoever put it together, you know what, you did something and you got involved, and that's what politics is about, that's what community is about. The issue I had with the petition, or the framing of the petition, is that it didn't necessarily reflect the full what was in the consultation. So it didn't say there was going to be a 1 hour free, it just kind of said we want free parking. So it's kind of, did everyone know whether they were signing that, what the actual consultation response was, but it was taken into account. In terms of, over that one, there was a question around, mines being made up before Christmas, and I can assure you that was not the case. Whilst I received it before Christmas, the consultation responses, I didn't read them till after Christmas, because I was thinking about Christmas. In terms of people approaching me for meetings, Council Burrows in particular, approached me before council meetings and after council meetings as well, and I always made time to speak to her, and I would also be quite probing in the sense of going, okay, well, it's fine to ask for this, but what's the alternative? What's the other solution? Kind of, we want to try and make things sustainable. So I'm all ears for a different operating model if one was suggested. Yep, there was an exchange of calls between me and Councillor Burrows once I got a number. I think that might have been down to Councillor Watson, so thank you. But yeah, I was unwell at one point, and we didn't manage to cross paths properly, but we had spoke quite a lot. In terms of the petition, I've done a little quick check, and there's addresses on it from Preston North End to Tootsie's, so I'm not saying that's anything to think, but we don't have a formal process of dealing with petitions in South Ribble, so we took it in the spirit it was offered, and it did impact the outcome. In terms of the reference to £642, I'm not sure what that reference is in terms of an annual pass. So a long stay business permit is £400, which works out at £1.10 per day, which is pretty good value if you were going to park for 365 days a year. No one has an entitlement just because they work somewhere to park on a council car park. Ultimately, if it's not benefiting all of council tax payers, it's kind of a balance. And just because we pay council tax doesn't mean we're entitled that the council gives us everything. I pay council tax as well. So there was reference to some council members felt undermined. I don't know if that was in response to me or not, but I've always tried to engage with her openly and transparently in my role as a councillor and cabinet member, and I'll continue to do so. So I hope that wasn't. I hope none of my comments have been taken in that spirit. In terms of my reflections, Chair, in terms of the process, there's lots of different things we could do, or potentially Scrutiny might want to think about. And whilst I had kind of mixed emotions about the calling, because I do think the process has been followed, there's always a learning opportunity, and a range of things we could look at or could think about. And I don't think it's specific to this consultation. I think it's just generally a member engagement is thinking about, you know, does the forward look for cabinet is it helpful to members? Is it helpful to the cabinet? Is it helpful for understanding the decision-making process of things? Is there a way that we could, via Democratic Services, look at how we provide engagement on hot topics or potential future decisions to members outside of the decision-making process, alongside the developing the policy? Because, you know, I didn't foresee. I remember sitting down with Gail and saying, I don't want us to rush this. There's no rush. There's no need to. My inbox wasn't being inundated with people saying, what's going on, what's going on. I wanted to get the right decision. And sometimes that takes a little bit longer for various reasons. In terms of another area you might want to consider, I don't know if we have a formal kind of set in stone, we must respond to consultations by X date, or after 6 weeks, 8 weeks after the consultation closes, because it might help people if they knew that, well, you would get a response within 8 weeks, but if it's going to take longer, then we have to issue kind of a reason why it's going to take longer, because this did take a little bit longer than I thought it might, but it was because we were being really diligent. The consultation, in terms of it kind of not just being online, I think we got a balanced and proportionate approach, but I think it was for local councillors to, you know, take that initiative where they wanted to, which Councillor Burrows did, Councillor Bollenberg did, you know, others did as well, in terms of having them conversations, getting coordinated responses, coming to officers or me and saying, actually, we'd like to do this, or we'd like to do a community drop-in centre session or something like that. And go, yeah, okay, absolutely, we can do that if that's an issue. And then, as a cabinet member, one of the things I talked earlier about the £1.8 million that we're facing next year in terms of budget gap, you know, the public, officers, councillors might have ideas about what we could do around that. They might have ideas of how we could save money, and they might be quite surprised at how much we're already doing. So this year, for Fit for the Future, we're already saving £1 million. We've got to save another 1.8 on top of that next year. So it has given me a bit of food for thought in terms of how we consult with people about that. Because whilst I don't think there should be an entitlement that things should be served to councillors on a kind of silver platter, because we've all got our responsibility to kind of do our job and look for things and be alert and kind of thing. It's also quite tricky when everyone's busy, so we should be a bit more maybe helpful to kind of provide that information. And then I guess the last point I was going to end on was just around that kind of politics in general, around cross-party working, and kind of sometimes how we're just kind of all in it for the gotcha moment rather than the kind of how could we make this better. And sometimes it's building them bridges across different personalities and cohorts of councillors and everything in between. But as far as I'm concerned, in my role, if anyone's got a good idea or anyone's got an idea that I might not think is good, but I'll still listen to the idea, I'm happy to have that conversation with them and have that open debate about, yeah, but okay, where do you draw the line? What about this? And ultimately, you've got to make a decision, haven't you? So thank you very much for your time, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Roberts. You will not be surprised, having been before the Scrutiny Committee before, that we have a number of questions for you. I'm assuming that Gail Wootton, you're here to support the councillor rather than wishing to speak yourself. Yeah. On page 10, Councillor Roberts, just for you're able to get to it, the bottom of the page, dates of sign-off. For clarity and for the record, please could you confirm the decision was made on the 18th of March 2026 and not 2025 as printed in the report?
I can indeed, yes.
Thank you,
Chair. Good question. Was that you that spot that, or
sorry?
Was that you that spot that?
We work as a committee on this. Yes. The date on the report is the 19th of March, which is after the date the Cabinet member signed off. Could you explain that?
Gail's kind of telling me that it's the way that ModGov generates.
Okay, so
things,
this is a
but we can
technical
look
issue.
into it.
Automatically populates a date
Yeah,
when you
so,
open it.
yeah.
So it's a technical issue of the way the software works.
Yeah.
Thank you. As stated in the report, car parking is emotive and members have raised concerns. No, I'm sorry, I'm going off on a wrong question. I've got a comment by that one. The supplementary report responding to the reasons, we're grateful for that, responding to the reasons for the call-in. Why was the information that was in your supplementary report not included in the original decision report so that there was, which would perhaps have given more transparency? How do you decide what goes into your report? How do you miss out? And what is appropriate transparency to the process in making up the report?
Yeah, I'll start and then I'll defer to officers because I think there's two different angles to it. But it's not common practice to put the amount of detail that has been put in this call-in paper in an EMD or an executive member decision. I don't know why, but it's not. But the information I think could have been gathered. It's obviously been gathered via an EMD, but it could have been gathered just by a conversation or asking of a request of things. But we've kind of not. We've done this and had a meeting and officers prepared a paper and things like that. But in terms of deciding what goes in and what doesn't go in, I just get presented with the actual decision to make. And before that, there's lots of build up in terms of the kind of what information I need to make that decision. But I'll pass to Gail if there's she wants to add anything.
Only to say that it's always a balance, isn't it, in terms of the information that's put into any report. You know, if we included everything that we possibly could do, all reports would be at least twice as long as they are. But in terms of the bare minimum, we need to make sure that we are providing enough information to Councillor Roberts or to any cabinet member to make a lawful decision, which is why you see that there's comments from the statutory finance officer and also from the monitoring officer as well, to double check that at least there is that information there. There could always be more, absolutely, but in this case, that information wasn't provided at that time for no particular reason other than it wasn't felt absolutely necessary in terms of justifying the decision that was before Councillor Roberts to make.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Yeah, thanks, Jim. Can I ask a supplementary to that? So on the one hand then, what can we do in the future to improve in terms of the information which is included in reports? And secondly, in terms of this decision, how can another member of the council or a member of the public, particularly in an area that might be affected by the decision, have confidence that you had all the information that you absolutely needed at that time? So the independent onlooker, how could they have confidence that you had all the information to hand?
Thanks, Councillor Green. In terms of the first question, I'll have to start with the second because I've got the first. In terms of the second question, I guess they can't, can they? But in terms of, because they don't know what information I had. But I guess if anyone wanted to know, they could have a conversation with me. But I really do take this role seriously. I took the call in quite critical of me and kind of not doing things professionally, because I really think we do things professionally. I took so much time. Like when I got to be quite unique and stand as a councillor, you've got to be quite strange, as a leader tells me. But you then get involved with things and you kind of go, well, I didn't get involved to deal with car parking, but it's part of the job, and I'll do it to the best of my ability. And I really was diligent in terms of looking at all the various factors that could influence it and trying to get the right balance of what worked for the communities and what works for the kind of the financial operating model. So that was the kind of, I just hope that people see that and see that we're normal people and take confidence from that. Sorry, you're going to have to remind me of the first bit of the question.
Yeah, certainly. The first question was what can we learn from this for the future to make sure that we have more information and the right information in reports?
Yeah, I think that's I think that's a really good area for scrutiny to consider. I don't necessarily know I don't necessarily see how that report, that information in that report would have helped me, but it might have helped, you know, the people knowing the context in terms of, say for example, I've not spoken to Councillor Hatworth, it might have helped him understand the rationale as to why I've kind of made that decision. But I think we've got to think about, or Scrutiny have to consider, is it proportionate for officers to do that much extra work for certain things, and which ones would they do it for and which ones wouldn't they do it for, and kind of that's the magic weight of it, isn't it?
Can I just make a comment as chair about your comments about personal responsibility? The call-in isn't just about how you work through this decision. It's about how the council, through its apparatus, through the way it works, made this decision, if that makes sense. So I think it's much wider than your own activity within this process. It's about the processes themselves by which we make those decisions as well.
Yeah, I take that in the spirit, Chair. I see, obviously, as a cabinet member, I see the extension of the council as part of the role, and I take in that spirit.
Councillor Walton.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, Councillor Roberts. My question is about the consultation, and it's something that you just referred to before when you said that no one had asked for any of the consultation results, and I have emailed you on a number of occasions of concessions for volunteers working in charity shops, having concessions on car parking charges, and I did ask for the results of the consultation. I've also asked the Chief Executive since January for the results of the consultation, and I received them on the 7th of April. So I think that that's just one point I need to make, that why were we not able to see the results of the consultation before they were published for everyone to see on the 7th of April. So the decision-making report refers to it being following the consultation. So why is there no reference to the consultation process and outcomes in the report? And you've referred to reading to all the consultation results because you received them on the 19th of December and, you know, listened to people and helped to make your decision. So why was not some of those issues not included in the outcomes of the report?
Thanks, Councillor Walton. Whilst I do find it a bit peculiar, sat on the other side as a calling member, I will take it in the spirit that it's offered. Yeah. You specifically did raise stuff around Hope Terrace and car parks for charity shop workers. And whilst I did look at concessions and looking at the factors that went into that, across all the car parks that were out for consultation, Hope Terrace technically wasn't out for consultation, but I took it in the spirit that it was offered and did consider it. But in terms of that, it's where you draw the line, you know, because it's kind of, do you look at medical centres and GPs and dentists and things, where do you kind of draw the line? And Hope Terrace has got quite a specific, unique arrangement that works for the community as well. In terms of, so I wasn't aware you'd asked for the consultation responses in January. So I was made aware by Gail a few weeks ago, 3 or 4 weeks ago, and I said, well, yeah, more than happy to, you know, get them out, but why don't we? I also said, why don't we issue them as part of the pack as well? And so thank you to the corporate service team that have done that to try and get it in a font that's big enough for everyone to see. I can't comment on why you didn't receive it in January. There wasn't a request to hold it back, and if it's been overlooked, or, you know, I'm sure it wasn't done intentionally in a secretive way. But if you do have anything like that in the future, just let us know and we can try and unpick it. It goes for any member. You know, you're the leader of the opposition, and you're entitled to that information.
Thank you, Councillor Bell.
Hello, Wes. Thanks for coming. I feel you're on trial here. I promise I won't shoot you afterwards. It was just something that you were talking about the process of consultation, etc., etc. And it was something I picked up on. You said, well, you know, anybody can approach me if they want to know anything, blah, 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 blah. You know, any of the councillors can do this. So what I'm picking up is the onus is on us as an individual councillor to say, oh, heck, he's doing something on fishing in the Middle East, or he's doing something on parking, or whatever it is, the onus is on us to say, will you tell me about it? And we might not even know you're doing it. So I think that is a barrier for, you know, backbenchers, particularly, who are not always privy to what's going on in the higher echelons of the cabinet, don't find out about things. And I'm not just saying it's about parking, it could be about anything. So I think the onus we need to look at, the onus isn't on us, it's on us having even a smidgen of information that might, I'm interested in that.
Can I ask you to come to the question?
Yeah, well, it's not a question, it's just an observation.
I know,
saying,
we'll make
so will you let us
observations
know
in
next
our
time you're doing
sign-up.
anything? There you go. Will that do?
I interpreted my own question from Councillor Bell. I'm with used to her style, and I like it. But I think she's right, and I did reflect on in terms of in my opening kind of, you know, how do we engage with all members? And there's a balancing act, isn't there? So after tax, I get paid £16 a day to do this job, and I probably do more than that. And sometimes to the detriment of my family, and sometimes to the detriment of my health, and sometimes to the detriment of lots of other people. But I really enjoy it, and I won't change it, because it's a proudest day of my life to be elected as a councillor, and I'm privileged to do this role. But for that amount of money, you're not going to get perfect, and you know, we'll always can do better. We can always do more, but it's getting that balancing act, isn't it? And it's getting that sweet spot between the onus of who's on who. And I'll say here, sat as, you know, I'm part of I'm a Labour councillor. I've probably updated my Labour group more with going through the process, or even before the process, because what I wanted to do some pre-consultation before the consultation went out to say, well, what is it about our local areas and what would work potentially, and it's that kind of cross collaboration of parties that we don't necessarily maybe get right all the time, and it's not through withholding. It's just kind of various different things, isn't it? Of ages of councillors and types of councillors and the different types, social media and not. And
can I
go for it, Chair.
Cut into this a little bit, because I have tried to say this isn't about personalities and so on, and we do understand the work-life balance of councillors. We're all effectively volunteers who are slightly subsidised to help us do the work that we volunteer to do. The question that Councillor Bell was alluding to was about where is the decision making on the onus of who is to ask questions? Is it for those with the knowledge to dispense that knowledge, or is it for those of us without the knowledge to ask about things we don't know about?
Asking the question, we don't know the question, and then the answer. I think it's for anyone to come forward and add value to the process. And if someone watched the cabinet meeting in September or saw the paper, and they thought, oh, that's interesting, that's in Liverpool Road, that's in Riffield Avenue, this might be sensitive, let me tell the cabinet member something he doesn't know, I'm all ears. But there's a balancing act, and I think it's on all of us, officers, members, cabinet, to try and do what's the best for South Ribble.
Councillor Ashton.
Yes, I suspect my question's actually to officers, which is slightly unusual. So it's heading into a suggestion, perhaps, that we might want to consider later. But I wondered why we don't have the equivalent of a forward plan for the executive member decisions. I don't think we see them, do we? Are they somewhere where that we can find them? That I don't know, because I don't know where they are. And then the other one is, and I did just check, because I've got ModGov open, certainly back in the day when I used to work in local government, you had background documents for reports, which we still do for cabinet and committee reports, and whether it might be helpful, sorry to make work, but to have a little background documents section on the executive member.
I think this is something for us to consider in our considerations rather than being a question for the staff at the moment. Councillor Green.
Yeah, if I could just take us back a minute, Chairman. So Councillor Roberts and your officers, did we at any point specifically consult with the ward members whose wards were most affected by the proposed decisions. I mean, my ward wasn't. There isn't a car park in my ward that was going to have charges levied on it, but there are a number of wards where that did apply. Did you specifically consult with those members, would be my first question. And secondly, did we, as the 50 councillors, even actually know when the consultation started? So yes, we knew that Cabinet took a decision in September to go out to consultation, but were we actually informed? Because if we were, I must have missed it because I don't recall it. Were we actually informed when the consultation period started, so that councillors themselves could submit their views if they so wished, and could ensure that their local communities could submit their views?
Thanks, Chair. So thank you, Councillor Green. To be honest, I'm not sure how all members are informed on consultations generally. Like, I know we get a weekly planning email, but in terms of consultations, I don't think there is a mechanism that updates all members. And maybe we should, maybe Scrutiny could think about that as a recommendation, because that would be quite helpful. I know we do put our consultations on the social media, and I always see that, but there's different ways. There's ward councillors that we do consult with our residents and go to drop-ins and teas, surgeries, or at church, wherever it is. So that is a good way to strengthen it. In terms of specific ward councillors, some yes, some no. So in terms of I've not got the full list of the councillors next to each one, but it's been where councillors have brought information to me, or what I've done, if I don't know about a car park, I've tried to update myself on it, or learn about it, speaking to the team, speaking to the local knowledge that we've had. So Neil was there as well, our finance director, to input on that, and then also drawing on councillors who might not necessarily be in that ward, but they're in that area, so in Penwitham in particular, to try and kind of, because I think Penwitham is quite a sensitive one with them two car parks, so I was really mindful about trying to get the right outcome for that, which people still might not be happy about, but it was for sort.
I think you've answered the question, and we will bear that in mind when we're making our considerations. Councillor Burton-Johnson, please.
Sorry, Chairman. Sorry, the second part of the question wasn't answered. So were councillors actually informed when the consultation period started?
This is what so I thought I'd answered it. Someone said I hadn't answered it, so I'm sure they'll ask later. But I'd have to check my emails in the sense of usually when there's a press release of some sort, it does go through to all councillors, or there's at least a mailing list. I couldn't say whether it had or not, so I don't know, Councillor Green. But that's not a specific thing to this consultation. That's consultation in general.
Well, that's exactly what this committee is looking at, because we're not just looking specifically at this, we're also looking at how what we observe from this reflects on the general policies of the council. And for example, if you take Parliament, I don't know how many times our current government has been told by the Speaker, who we all know, that Parliament must be told before the press is told. And the same principle is in the minds of the committee as well. I'm just saying that, so we will be asking about that in terms of our normal procedures of what policy, what is decision making, how decision making is communicated to the members prior to the press releases, if that makes sense. So we'll come to that in our recommendations. Councillor Burton-Johnson.
Thank you, Chair. On page 9, paragraph 15, it's about the improvement works to all the various car parks. Is it accurate to describe the installation of pay and display machines and associated signage as actual improvements to the car parks?
So I'm trying to relate how the question it relates to the calling, but in the spirit it's offered. Oh, people do want new signs sometimes, usually on the street, not necessarily the car park, but we've got to do it. But it's all capital work, so it's capital investment, and that's the total of it gone. But I think it's we're arguing over semantics maybe, but it's not. That wasn't a political point I've put in there. That is just what the officers have put in their report.
Thank you, Councillor Gabbard. Number 7.
Wait, yeah, so I was waiting for it to actually come up, Chair. It was just flashing green for a second. Yeah, whilst I'm one for a fan of sticking with where the process was followed, the committee wanted to ask the question of page 9, paragraph 16, climate change and air quality. The report says there is no impact on climate change. How accurate is this statement when we are talking about cars and what assessment was carried out? Now, I know that there's probably be a struggle with quantifying said amount, but obviously if there's electric charge points, if it's sort of the increase in charges is going to ensure people are trying different modes of transport, such as buses, or whether it in fact just increases more churn and more cars, that's not included in the reports. That's a potential recommendation for improvement.
If I can comment on that, if you'll note the second report, so the report you've got in front of you tonight, the scrutiny, is a bit more expansive on the climate change part of it, and I actually asked officers to put that in because Councillor Unsworth, as our climate cabinet member and environment and street scene, is always flying the flag for that stuff, and I think it's just that. But this is a wider point that. When I speak to CAF and Councillor Unsworth and when I speak to Councillor Pritchard around equalities and diversity, as an organisation, when officers are busy delivering stuff and getting the kind of accurate information in there, them two parts, the equalities and diversity and the climate change and equality, aren't necessarily the beefiest bits of the report. Apologies to any vegans for the terminology, but it's more of a, sometimes, I wouldn't say it's an afterthought because there are legal responsibilities we got, but it's kind of the best practice and standard that we put in the reports. But going into that, we had conversations about various different bits as well.
Thank you. Councillor Bell, was the question that we've got as number 8 assigned to you?
Yes, it was one. About equality and diversity. And now being a bit less able than I was, it's a question of, one, did we meet the equality things, and did we consult anybody from a disability place or dementia or any of the, people who want a change, a difference? Have you a blue badge? Are you going to get it free? Whatever. What sort of consultation went on there in specifics?
Was it on? There we go. There was an equalities. There was an impact assessment done by officers. Sorry, so we had the officers to speak more about it. But one of the big things which I did mention at the cabinet meeting when we went out to consultation was that where we were going to invest in car parks, we would review the number of bays for accessible bays and things like that. Our car parks aren't amazingly big, but I'd love to see some family spaces as well, because like having a little one with getting the kid out of the car is quite tricky sometimes. But and also anyone who's got a blue badge is free. It's free parking at car parks as well. So it was a consideration. I think this is about the above and beyond, isn't it? The kind of, did we go and consult with X? Did we go and consult with Y? Not necessarily, in terms of did we go to a specific organisation about X, Y and Z. There's actually a bit of interesting work that Scrutiny might be interested in at a different time around kind of assets and how we engage with kind of the different communities and kind of have a voice in terms of that. But wasn't perfect, but we did try. Alan, do you want to come in?
I was just going to add as well, when we do implement changes, whether it's relining or resurfacing, we engage with an engineer then who helps us redesign the car park to the latest standards, and we make sure that we've got the appropriate disabled bays, drop curbs, etc. So.
Good, thank you. Can I just supplement? You made an observation of you need a family space. Now that's only just come on because you've got a small child now. 5 years ago you wouldn't have even thought about that. I wouldn't have really thought about 5 years ago about being disabled. So it's an ongoing
process in everybody's lives where our circumstances change. You get a family, you become disabled, you've been a bit poorly, haven't you, sweetheart? So his mobility's been buggered. So, you know, I think it's one of those things that until it's happening to you or a member of your family, you are not always aware. And so perhaps when you, the family space, you need a bit more room to open a door, you know, to get in and out and stuff. So it's just one of those things. But thanks for that. I'm glad you're keeping up with legislation.
It's all right, yeah. Everyone's got a passion, haven't they? And it's about bringing that kind of passion
I wouldn't say I'm passionate about being disabled, but I'm passionate about being able to get in and out of a car.
Really, if we're going to finish this meeting before midnight, we need to stop the conversations and deal with the questions specifically. I'm very grateful for those of you who have stayed for more than an hour and a half now, and we do have more questions to ask, but we do need to make sure we keep to the questions. What we're tending to do is to realise there are things that need to go into our consideration later, but then we don't need to raise them now. We need to raise them when we meet as a committee. Councillor Walton, you had a...
Thank you. It's carrying on from this. I'm looking at some of the consultation results. It says about not being equality or for disabilities and discrimination against older residents not being able to use the ticket machines. Has any of this been taken into consideration? And referring back to question, I think it was question 6 about the budget, and you're saying that there's a £1.8 million budget gap that we need to fill. Has there been any enforcement officer costs included in any of the budgets? Because it's no good putting these parking conditions into car parks when there's going to be no increase in enforcement, because I think a lot of places that's where it falls down, and people are parking in places where they shouldn't be, away from car parks, and so we need an increase in enforcement officers as well.
Can I ask members of the committee to keep your questions as brief as possible?
Thanks, Chair. In terms of the qualities of the machines, it was raised and considered was it last year? We changed actually supplier to make it more accessible. That was done under the leader when he was cabinet member. One of the most accessible things is ringing a number. That's the most accessible option. There's 5 different ways you can pay at our car parks. So it's considered. In terms of enforcement, obviously there will be increased revenue cost or running costs, but it would be offset generally by the income that would bring in, and then anything that kind of surplus would be reinvested back into the car parks, which you wouldn't get from a private company. And then there was reference to displacement and traffic enforcement there. Obviously we're not responsible for traffic enforcement or parking enforcement on roads, just our car parks. That's Lancashire County Council. But displacement again was considered, but it's balancing all them things.
Thank you. Councillor Green.
Yeah, thanks, Chairman. So it's disappointing, and it seems like you didn't carry out specific consultation with equality groups and people with protected characteristics, which is something which the council should be doing on all decisions of this nature. That's clearly something that we need to learn from. But moving on, I've got some other questions about the consultation, if that's okay, and quite a few of them, so I'll get through them as quickly as I can. So first of all, Councillor, do you feel that 3 weeks consultation was a sufficient length of time for this consultation?
So that's a good question. 3 weeks is a statutory minimum, so that's what the officers tell me. I think people did engage with it. There's quite a lot of comments in the consultation itself and the Facebook as well. Maybe that's an area for scrutiny to think about.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, it is a statutory minimum, and that doesn't necessarily mean it's the right period. And in particular, given that it took place in the lead up to Christmas, when people are distracted by preparing for Christmas, by wondering how they're going to buy all the presents at a time when there's a cost of living crisis, etc., etc., when people are busy working, etc. It was a difficult time to hold a consultation, and for it to be a short period, does that cause you any concern? With the benefit of hindsight, yes. And is it something that we can learn from?
You can always learn from stuff. Yeah, maybe. I think there was one, we did do one Wernham car park, and we actually extended it an extra week. Now, we didn't extend it on this one, but whilst that was the formal bit of the consultation, we still had lots of different people, Councillor Burrows giving me information. It was an ongoing process. The petition wasn't a formal part of the consultation, neither were the Facebook comments, but they were taken in the spirit, because I take the job seriously. But ideally, maybe it could have been an extra week. I don't know. But I don't think, would it make any difference? No, I don't think so. Because the nuggets were already in there. If you read them, the nuggets are in there around suggestions. Not the people saying, we want free car parking. The people actually saying, what about this? We're not opposed to car parking charges, but could you consider this? Could you consider that? Because ultimately, I don't know why the people... Yeah, it's an interesting... It's a choice, isn't it? It's a choice, and we've got to make the tough choices. And if people... How many people use a specific car park each day? And would you say every resident goes to that car park? No, probably not. So if I look at Ryfield in particular, I think we visited on a Tuesday afternoon, and there was 2 spaces. I'd give a really good guess that a lot of staff were parked there and not customers.
Moving on, so page 19 of the report at paragraph 23 lists how the consultation took place, and it is quite an extensive list that we did carry out consultation with. However, it's clear from that list that we didn't consult elected members, and we've made reference to that earlier. Did we actually consult with the community hubs, which are a key part of the decision making within this council? And did we consult with neighbouring authorities such as parish or town councils?
Well, I think you can see from the list who we consulted with, but I think if Scrutiny want to consider adding people to that list, then they should do that, and community hubs would be quite a good one, really, wouldn't it? We've been at community hub meetings and we don't talk about consultations and how they impact our community, but actually it's quite a good space and quite a good voice. So if a hub wants to give a consultation response, they should do that, and I think they're well within their rights, within the framework the deputy leaders set up to do so.
Okay, thank you.
I'd actually find it quite valuable if hubs did generate some kind of responses, because it's local knowledge, isn't it? And it's kind of, you're taking an assessment on what that local knowledge is, and like I say, what's the shared understanding of what information I've got or what you've got? We don't know.
And turning to that leads me nicely into my next question, is given that we didn't take the opportunity to gain that local knowledge via our elected borough councillors, via parish or town councillors, via the hubs, etc., etc., what assurance can you give us that you gain the full local knowledge before you actually took the decisions which you took?
I think I've covered this earlier, if truth be told, but I came in tonight and I said to Councillor Sharples, I said to Councillor Flinty-Geldy, I said, this is me tonight, I've got a plain piece of paper, I'm coming with an open mind and an open book, and I said that I will write down anything that anyone mentions that I may have not considered during the consultation responses and during the process. And so far, there's nothing that anyone has said at the minute that I've not thought about in terms of a consideration in terms of consulting. Now, we could say there are certain areas we could have done more. For example, you said there's not specific equality groups and things like that. And I think it's just continuous improvement, but there's not a specific thing where someone's gone, well, actually, if you do that, there's an unintended consequence with this. If anything, Councillor Howarth actually said, thanks for taking the all-day parking charges away, because that would have caused more issues and chaos. And it was actually a consultation response in the consultation that said, if you want to keep churn, don't do all-day parking at Liverpool Road. And I was like, well, that's a good idea. And sometimes you don't see the wood from the trees when you're kind of busy doing stuff. So you've actually got to get them nuggets out of the consultation responses. And that's why it's really important that people step forward and get involved in public service and life, because it's all our place, isn't it? All our home.
No, I actually appreciate the fact that you have...
I am answering the question to the person in the public, whoever said that.
They
can ask their questions later. And if they want to disagree, we can disagree and do it nicely.
Yeah, I appreciate that you have looked at the consultation responses and shaped the ultimate decision accordingly. There seems to be a reliance on online consultation. So how were those that might be digitally excluded consulted on the proposals? For instance, a letter was sent but no reference to the questionnaire to gain views, etc., was included in that. So that is a concern. And whilst we've clearly taken on board the views which have been submitted, I would submit that we could have got, over a longer period, or maybe carried out at a different time, more views which would have formed a much clearer picture. For instance, we've had a reference tonight to a petition which gathered 50 times as many signatures as what the consultation got. Now, you will always get more responses on a petition, but we need the consultation responses. And if you'd carried out in different ways, could we have gained more that would have added value to this, in your opinion?
Yeah, no, I think that anything that Scrutiny recommends is only going to strengthen the kind of democracy review you've just done around participation in residents, and it can only strengthen it. But also, we've got to be proportionate, haven't we?
Relating to the petition, you've already, in your responses, given us some more information. And you may just want to say a couple more words to this. How were the petitions considered by the Cabinet member, by yourself? What evidence is that they were considered alongside other consultation, as they don't appear to be referenced in the decision-making report? What sort of analysis is it? This is perhaps a general question for officers. Do we have a general policy on how we analyse such petitions? How do we handle them in general?
Yeah, so we don't have a policy, and I think I've referenced that earlier in terms of an area Scrutiny might want to think about. I considered it in the spirit it was given, despite the caveats I mentioned earlier around kind of the framing of it. And I've also referenced the kind of specific nature at Ryfield in terms of the kind of commercial interest, the kind of Pemberton Master Plan, and also the car parking charges. So there's a triangulation of various things there that we took extra time and looked at extra information that officers provided me with, which then were reflected in the decision of the consultation. But we've got to take the spirit of the petition it was given in, and people signing something is good.
Councillor Ashton.
Yes. To be honest, my question is around timescales for consultation and the decision-making process. But I actually think that Councillor Roberts has probably answered that several times over in what he said already. But I only came into the meeting into our pre-meeting a bit late. So if there was something else intended in that question, and somebody needs to ask something else.
No, I think with time as we are, we won't continue with that. Councillor Walton.
Sorry, Chair, I think my question's been answered as well.
Thank you very much, that's really helpful.
Thank you, Chair. On page 21, calling reason 5, the rationale included there is really helpful, but why was it not made available in the decision-making report?
Yeah, I think we talked about that earlier a little bit in terms of the same spirit of kind of what's included, what's not included. I hope that gives some confidence of what was decided pre making the decision. And I did, offer to. There was nothing to hide. It was just that's why. I don't decide what was in the reports, and I think officers probably, if I got a report with that in, it was telling me what I already know. But then there's maybe a face inside of it for members and what they might not know. But that's just a case of asking, and just a case of it's getting that balance, isn't it? Of us telling them, asking where's the sweet spot, and getting proportionate in terms of officers' time, because ultimately these guys are getting paid and they're sat here and it's 7:30 at night and they're diligent and they're professional, and it's about how do we best use them to benefit kind of things for our council and for our residents. So it's all about being proportionate.
Councillor Green, I think.
Okay, Chairman, thank you. Reference is made on page 24, paragraph 39, to the decision being added to the forward plan in January of this year. Please could you talk us through the timetable for the decision, and why was this not communicated to members and to the wider public, so that we could give some confidence in decision making?
So I think there's two different things there, isn't there? So there's clarity of decision timescales and confidence in decision that's been made, and they are a bit separate. So I can see how they kind of go hand in hand, but not fully. I don't decide what goes on the forward plan. That's a question for Democratic Services to deal with. I think I did say earlier around kind of, would it be more helpful to have a different type of forward plan? Would it be more helpful to kind of say, Cabinet will always respond to consultations within 8 weeks, and if it's longer than that, then they'll explain why that is. For me, it was about doing the process properly, and the decision came when for the formality, when everything was right. And even at that point, I think when it came, I think there was 2 areas where I asked for some changes because it hadn't quite translated properly, just between kind of the pace we were going at.
The problem is that the public feel the decision hanging over them, as a quote, the sword of Damocles hanging over them while the decision is about to become. And the other point is when you went out to consultation, you set out that it was likely to be implemented in May 26. So was that prejudging the decision in any way?
So I think it wasn't about prejudging, and obviously, well, we haven't done that because we've changed the consultation, changed the outcome from the consultation. I think what we were trying to do at the outset is outline what the process might look like, depending on what came back from the consultation. But obviously, things can always change. I always kind of have try and feel the weight of something in the community of like, what's it like on Facebook, what's it like on this, what's it like there. But there was a big initial response, but then after that there wasn't a massive thing, but I did keep getting representations from different councillors about various car parks at Bamber Bridge and Ryfield, and that's, I think, based on some of that information, that's why we did more work and we asked for more information. Alan went down and spoke to people and to try and get that local insight of what's going on.
Councillor Bell.
Yeah, I think it may have already been answered this.
Okay, that's fine. In which case we'll move on. Thank you very much.
It's about getting the press releases out before we know anything about it.
Yeah, we've already dealt with that. So we'll move on to our last question, and then I'm going to take a comfort break before we invite members of the council who are not members of this committee to ask questions should they wish to. Clearly, one of the reasons for this meeting is to learn lessons, or to see if we can identify lessons that can be learned. Have you any comments on anything that you've had your blank bit of paper, but is there anything that you would like to point out to us that you think are lessons that ought to be learned?
So I did cover them in my introduction, so I'm not going to repeat them for the sake of everyone's sanity. But I'm sure Democratic Services and the committee have heard them. There's always things to learn. We can always do things better, but that doesn't necessarily mean the decision would change or the outcome would change, because sometimes there's people on both sides.
Just wanted to give you the opportunity to do that before we finish this particular part of the conversation, rather than because since you wrote that, or since that was written, there might have been things that have come up, particularly this evening. But thank you for your consideration. I am now going to have a 5-minute comfort break so that we can come back to to you again if there are any questions from members of the council. Thank you. to questions from members of the council who are not members of this committee, and I have a question from Councillor David Shaw.
Thank you, Chair. And not to prolong this further, obviously the public will want to have their say. 2 points that might be relevant to the committee and to the officers. I think the problem we have, and the reason this scrutiny committee call-ins happen, is that we're not satisfied that there's necessarily been the audit trail on the decision that we would like there to have been. And on the question of potentially extending a consultation period, if you're going to include the local parishes and the community hubs, you need that flexibility that Wes has already expressed, that the 3 weeks period is not going to fit in with those council cycles. Thank you.
So that wasn't a question, it was a point. Councillor Caleb Tomlinson.
Oh. I didn't even know it was online.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. This isn't a question either. I just want to clarify that one of the car parks is in my ward, in Banbury West, and I was consulted by Councillor Roberts at an early stage, and he responded to my answers. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Councillor Matthew Tomlinson.
I do have questions, you'll be glad to hear. I just wondered if the Cabinet member, first of all, could confirm with me that the original report, I think, was published on the 10th of September and was then considered in a Cabinet meeting on the 17th. Can he confirm that the papers for those Cabinet were available to all councillors, that Cabinet is a meeting available to all councillors, and that the decision to go out to consultation on these car parks was therefore available to be known to all councillors? Can he just confirm what I've said? Then can he then confirm which individual members approached him proactively, having seen that a car park in their area was on this list, a published list? And can he further confirm that as a result of those approaches, some changes were made to the original proposals?
Thank you.
I can confirm all of that, Chair. I can also... I'd not prepared a list of who's approached me, but in generally speaking, Councillor Farnworth, Councillor Hunter, about as ward members, Councillor Burrows had spoken to me several times about Ryfield, Councillor Martin and Flannery as well, yeah, Councillor Bollenberg. So an array of people. I've had conversations with Councillor Walton as well about various things. I've had a conversation with Councillor Ashton. I've spoken to yourself, Chair, about Worden Car Park, which was a separate consultation. The leaders referenced conversations he's had with other members to me as well, from different parties. I'd not specifically spoken to the Lib Dems myself. So, yeah, that's it. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. It's helpful to have that in the timeline.
Chair, can I just comment on one thing that was mentioned? Obviously, the conversation with the other Councillor Tomlinson, Caleb. I can't remember that one. So generally, they're really memorable with Caleb. So I do apologise for that. But there was a reference around audit trail by Councillor Shaw, and I think that would have been a really valid call-in reason. And that wasn't in the call-in, so that is a shame. But the audit trail is really waterproof on this, and any suggestion otherwise, which I'm not saying Councillor Shaw is doing, wouldn't be just.
Councillor Martin.
Thank you, Chair. I'll be as brief as I can. So just a couple of things. The petition, the handwritten petition, I sort of wondered whether we should be looking at another method of supplying a means to do a petition online. Lancashire County Council do that, other councils do it. I say that for fear of the GDPR issues that may erupt from there, because if you've got 2,000, God knows how many people's names, addresses and possibly signatures. That's a bit of a concern, and we'd like to see where that goes and be sort of destroyed, I hope. The other one is visiting times. I mean, some of the premises, businesses near where I am, my ward is, they have quite high turnover of visitors to their premises. So faffing around, and this goes throughout the borough as well. So faffing around to get a ticket to do a 5-minute shop to get something, because I mean I know all our businesses are efficient and do things as quickly as they can. So to faff around, it'll take longer to get a ticket, for instance, than it would to get the product that you were going in for. The other consideration was around parishes and town councils. For instance, Penwitham Town Council has an agreement with Tesco's that we can use their car park for a limited period for our venue events. However, if you start charging at a car park close to that, they might start using the Tesco's, and that could have an effect on our possibility. So I just want to know if that was considered. And I think the other thing was the registration numbers, and whether there was any thought to putting a panel, say, in the shops or some of the frequently visited shops, whether they could just input their registration on a panel for the free parking section or not. Thank you, Chair.
Any comments on that, Councillor Roberts?
Yeah, a few. I didn't quite catch the full one around the displacement to Tesco car park, and I can't say I actively considered that. So that would be the first thing I put on my blank note.
What I think I heard was this was about consultation with the town council, because the town council has an understanding with Tesco rather than directly with Tesco.
Thank you, Chair. But I think that would be strengthened by having the parishes as part of that list that are consulted. In terms of the reg plates, we have looked at various different systems, and the leisure centres, especially Leyland Leisure Centre, will be a bit of a tap-in system with reg plates. The specific issue on Ryefield, it's 2 hours free. There's no ticket machine, so it will benefit the kind of, and that's why it was brought in to not have a ticket machine, because of the high turnover of staff, high turnover of visitors. So that was considered as well.
Thank you. Are there any other members of the council who wish to speak or ask questions? Sorry, my apologies. Our former mayor, but my brain is getting... Sorry. Yes, Councillor Molyneux, my apologies.
Am I on? Yep. Yeah, thank you for that. I mean, this it's not really a question, Chairman, more of an observation. It's obviously clear this evening, and I thank the Scrutiny Committee for going through this, but it's obvious that lots of things have been left out of this consultation that are key to that, especially for me, councillors. It should be a blanket thing straight away. They're all councillors are made aware, not just selected by 1 or 2 people or 1 or 2 members. So it's just lessons learned for me, that hopefully after this meeting tonight we'll realise that we have to move forward and get more people involved and make sure. I mean, a timeline of 3 weeks to me wasn't really that great, but that's how it is.
Yeah, it is about questions. So
I understand that.
I guess the comments you're making will be...
Thank you for letting me speak. Thank you.
Thank you. If that's all from members of the council, I want to give the opportunity to members of the public who are here, should they wish to ask questions about procedure. I have stressed more than once this evening that we are not dealing with the decision made, but the procedure by which the decision was made. So I just wanted to make that clear. If members of the public do wish to speak, there is a table at the end of the row on your left which has a microphone stand. There's a button on it which looks with a symbol that looks like a face talking, and Councillor Martin will help you so that you are heard.
Thank you. My name is Nick Everett. I'm here representing my wife, who's got a business in Penwitham, near to the library. I've got a number of questions, if I may, but if at any point I overstep the mark, I'm not used to this arena, and I'm not used to doing this sort of thing, so a little bit...
We will make it as easy for you as we can.
Yeah, I haven't had playtime today, so I'm a little bit nervous. There seems to be, from what I've been listening to, an awful lot of assumptions have been made this evening, and for me the decision is fatally flawed, but I know you're not here to look at what the decision was. But there's a number of comments that have been made I'd just like to ask questions about, please. There was a comment earlier, Alan visited local shops. I'd like to know which shops they were, please, because I know that as part of the engagement process, my wife's business was not visited, the sandwich shop was not visited, the library was not visited. So what shops did Alan actually visit, please?
Thank you.
And if I could have a number of... Thank you.
Are you going to do all the questions at once, or you do at once? Yeah.
Your other questions, notes will be made, and then we'll try and get back to you with the answers on each of them.
Yeah, no problem. Could the decision maker outline whom he and his colleagues actually visited, which businesses they actually visited? As a member, it's a different question. As a member of the public, hearing wasn't perfect, but it's not bad though. Is that really what the public expect of a consultation? They were the words of the gentleman earlier. Councillor Roberts commented that Hope Terrace works for the community. Where has he gleaned this information from? Because as a resident of that area, it certainly doesn't work. And funding schemes. We've had a 1.9% council tax increase, and my wife is about to have just under 30% rent increase. Those could be used instead of the scheme the gentleman's had to support funding. And I think probably from those questions there's probably a few points that could be reflected on and put on the blank piece of paper that exists at the moment.
Thank you. Councillor Roberts.
Yeah, I've no blank paper anymore. I've used all the sides. In terms of shops that were visited, so when I said Alan went to see the shops, this is Alan. We own 6 units or 7 units, and we went to see them on a specific day. I think it was Tuesday afternoon. We did go to the cafe shop. There was no one there on that day at that time, and we spoke to various people. And you know, to be fair, one of them was quite rude to Alan and wouldn't engage with him, and it's not acceptable because it ultimately is a member of our staff and he works for the council taxpayer. But others did speak to them, and we were really specific. Knowing the kind of shops in that area, I was pretty, so I use that area as well. I've got family in there. I lived in Penwood at various times. It was kind of looking at what shops would need long-term parking and things like that, where a lot of them is quite high turnover, as Councillor Martin said earlier. And there were some ones you could say, well, someone could sit in the bookies all day. Well, for me, that's not what I'm going to decide car parking policy on, and things like that. So it was kind of getting what's the balancing act, and if the kind of biggest kind of users of that car park were staff, providing an option which kind of got a sweet spot of having an affordable option for car parking for staff to stay long stay throughout the day, so it's like £1.10 a day, but getting that balance where it's not having to get a ticket if it's high turnover, so it's like longer than you'd actually need to get a ticket machine. But in return, we're not spending £7 grand on putting a ticket machine there, or we're not investing in the car park. We're just kind of trying to find a sweet spot. It wasn't perfect. You know what? We should be just more honest about kind of stuff. And there is this expectation from the public that everything should be perfect. I'm not saying you, I'm just saying general. And like, we're not perfect. No one's perfect. Nothing's perfect that we ever do. This organisation, is great and also has areas it can improve, and we'll always push it to do more and faster and harder. And ultimately, our institutions, whether it be this council or the government or whatever, aren't set up necessarily in the best interests in terms of delivering in terms of expectations, and then the kind of the balance of taxation and everything. It's just, so we've got to be a bit realistic and pragmatic, and that's generally my approach. Hope Terrace, in terms of it not working for the, or me saying it kind of works for the local area, so quite quite a number of council meetings after some changes were made a couple of years ago. Councillor Walton stood up and kind of said, this isn't working, that's not working, there was some changes made. Alan went down and spoke to local people and local businesses and kind of changed a few bits here and there, and we've not had as many kind of complaints to say. So if there's something that's not working or there's a way we could improve it, then happy to have a look at it. I just need to know what it is that we're looking at. Hope Terrace technically wasn't in this consultation though. There was a reference to a 30% rent increase, so I don't know the context and probably not the right space to do, but I don't know whether is it a rent increase in the sense of you in one of our units or no?
Yes,
I don't know.
It's a South Borough Council premises.
Yeah, okay. So there are some of our units that have not had a rent increase since 2014, some 2011. So
this is not the subject that we're dealing with this evening.
I'm not going into it, but it has been raised.
I think it's a conversation after the meeting, perhaps, or whilst the committee is in recess, that you can deal with that matter.
What the public expects in terms of delivering for value for money, and if we've got people who need rent increases, it's something that we've got to consider. We can't just overlook it.
Further questions?
Chair, could I just confirm so that my understanding is that Councillor Roberts and Alan collectively visited 6 premises. That's the information I've got. Is that correct?
To the best of my knowledge, that's the information. We tried to visit every unit that we owned in Ryfield. I've not got the full list in front of me. So
clarification from the chair. You visited properties that were owned by the council, but you didn't visit properties that are not owned by the council.
Yeah, so I talked earlier. So is it on? So let's be clear. I didn't go down because there's an element of operational kind of that it should be interfacing with the council, and then not necessarily me. You're right. We didn't consult all the businesses. We went specifically about to the units we owned, and the reason I've talked about earlier is kind of we're investing in master plan, potential car parking charges, and the triangulation with rent reviews as well, which is sensitive to small businesses.
So to be clear on the businesses that are affected by the car parking that we've dealt with, I think this is in your report, but was opportunity made for those businesses to respond to a consultation?
Well, I think they all had so there were some letters sent. One second ago. They all had the petition in the shops, didn't they? So they all kind of had a way to consult, and they could have responded. But people can laugh or what? I mean, listen, if you want to step forward and do stuff and get involved in public life...
Nobody's laughing. I'm just asking a question for clarity.
Yeah, no, absolutely. But they responded via the petition. If they wanted to pick up the phone and get my number off the website, they could do that, but they didn't.
Thank you.
So may I just ask one last final point?
I just wanted to make sure there were no other members of the public who wish to speak, because if there
are... Do you want to speak?
I think you've had your turn, and I'd like somebody else to come. But if there are not, I'll give you one more question.
I'm just, having spent 31 years working in the public sector and been involved in communication, engagement and consultation, I'm rather bemused out of all the businesses that are affected, that just 6 were actually consulted with. And I just...
On that.
Sorry, sir.
I asked that question deliberately that I've
physical.
asked.
Sorry.
That I asked the question of Councillor Roberts because that was beginning to be an impression given, but actually the answer that I got from my question was every premises was given the opportunity to respond to the consultation.
I take the point on board, sir, but does Mr Roberts not think or consider, as part of his reflection, that perhaps those South Ribble Borough Council premises, where people are paying rent, deserved a physical visit and a conversation, not just a soggy Tuesday afternoon walk around? Did they not deserve to have that personal touch, because they're the people paying all the money into the council. Did they not deserve that rather than what has transpired?
I think that's a point to the committee more than it is to Councillor Roberts, and we will take note of it.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
Chair, there is actually a point in that. The rationale in terms of kind of why we went to visit them specific things as part of the decision-making process. We put out a proposal, and I was really wanted to be confident that what we were going to actually implement would work. So, for example, I was really conscious that the only business I could think that it wouldn't work for necessarily would be the hairdressers. So I was really keen that we went down and spoke to them, and Alan did speak to them, and we did get some response kind of saying, well, people spend between 6 and 8 hours in the hairdressers, and there's an element of pragmatism which actually kind of is that the case. So what we offered as a kind of a workaround was that if the hairdressers wanted to buy daily permits for their customers, then that's what they could do, and that we went back in after the decision had been made, and they actually was not too fussed about it, and they might get back involved. Someone did reference earlier, it won't be on the YouTube, kind of go, he's not answering correctly anyway. Well, this is the issue, isn't it? What I don't know what people want. If they've got an issue with the council, and they've got an issue as a landlord, come and tell us, come and tell me. I will speak to the officers, and we'll try and work it. At Worden Park, all 3-4 tenants down at Worden Hall collectively got together with some issues, and we pretty much sorted them all out. It was just a case of communicating, and the person that earlier talked about kind of comms and things. Listen, we try so hard, and sometimes stuff isn't perfect, but we try our best.
I don't want to prolong the meeting, and I think...
Oh, no, it's fine. But if he's got ways that we can improve our comms, then bring them forward to the table.
We may well ask the Cabinet to consider the question of how improvements might be made, and in which case you're part of the Cabinet and will be able to respond to that. I just don't want to prolong the meeting. We will make our deliberations in a few minutes and come back to you. Are there any other questions from members of the public? In which case I'm going to call a recess. The committee will... Sorry, Councillor Green.
Yeah, point of order, please. At the beginning of the meeting, Councillor Tomlinson, the leader of the council, made reference to the code of conduct and the fact that Councillor Walton and myself had declared an interest, and as such we should not be taking part in this meeting. That was news to me. After 23 years on the council, I wasn't aware of that point, so I took the opportunity during the break to actually read the Constitution. I think Councillor Tomlinson is slightly misinterpreting what it says. To read it out, it says, in particular, no member may be involved in scrutinising a decision in which they have been directly involved or in which they have a pecuniary or personal interest. It's nothing to do with declaring an interest at a meeting. It's if you've had an interest in the decision that you are scrutinising. Clearly, I had no interest in that decision, and I don't believe Councillor Walton had any interest whatsoever, and I just thought the record needed to be set straight. Thank you.
Thank you. Matters of interpretation of our Constitution sometimes need clarification, but I'm grateful for both of you, and I will refer that matter to the appropriate officers in democratic services for the monitoring officer to look at our Constitution. It may be that we need to clarify the Constitution. Thank you. We will take a recess. I'm hoping that we'll be back in not too much time. You are welcome to stay for... If you wish to, but you do not have to stay. We will be coming back and voting on a number of resolutions from the committee, which will go back to the Cabinet and to the Council. We will be as quick as we can. Thank you. What we are going to do is we have a number of recommendations that we are unanimous on, which we will vote for en bloc. And then we have a decision about whether we refer the matter back to the Cabinet member or whether we accept that, which we will vote for separately. Are you clear? So, the recommendations first.
Thank you, Chair. Some of the themes from tonight that the committee might wish to consider recommending, that the Council reviews and strengthens its consultation and engagement strategy, particularly around timescales, methodologies, engagement with parish and town councils, community hubs and equality groups. The committee recommends that future executive member decisions include more detailed information to ensure transparency in decision making is demonstrated. The Scrutiny Committee reviews the way in which the Council communicates and engages with councillors in consultation and other matters. The committee recommends that ward members are consulted on significant decisions affecting their area with a think councillor first approach. The committee recommends that future reports strengthen and have more information on the equality and climate change impact assessments more effectively, and that a petitions policy and procedure is developed and included in the Council's constitution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. And would you show if you're in favour, please, members of the committee? Thank you. That's unanimous. And now we have two options for the committee to vote upon. How do we do this? Do we put both options and then we? I mean, if one fails, then the other one probably carried, but we should vote on both of them. Okay. So could you outline?
Chair, so the first option the committee might like to consider is that the executive member decision stands and be implemented as agreed.
So those in favour, please show. 4 in favour, which means there are those against. 3 against, no abstentions. So that is carried, which means we don't need to put the other one to the vote. Thank you very much for your time this evening. Sorry to keep you so long, but it's right that we give due diligence to this process and that we learn lessons from it. Thank you again.